Good evening, one and all. Thank you for joining us in this webinar. I am Dr. Mounam Chattopadhyay, postdoctoral trainee at Department of Endocrinology, NRS Medical College and Hospital, Kolkata. I welcome you all to another electronic endocrine enrichment by experts 4E series of webinars organized by the Endocrine Society of Bengal. The topic for today is time-restricted eating from theory to practice, a critical appraisal. It is an important and pertinent topic from both the endocrinologists and dietitians' perspectives. Today's session will be chaired by Professor Jubin Jagan Jacob sir. Sir needs no introduction. He is professor and head in the Department of Endocrinology, Christian Medical College, Ludhiana. He has over 150 publications in various national and international journals to his credit. He is also the executive editor of the Indian Journal of Endocrinology and Metabolism. He is also the member of Institutional Research Board. He has authored 3 books, and they are Endocrine Disorders in Pregnancy, Diabetes in Women and Clinical Update, Management of Diabetes mellitus and Complications. Thank you so much for joining, sir, and agreeing to be the chairperson. The speaker for today is Dr. Rahul Balsraj. He is currently working as an associate consultant endocrinology, VPS Lakeshore Hospital, Kochi. He has done his DM in endocrinology from NRS Medical College, Kolkata. He was a very promising student throughout, and he secured the first rank and gold medal in DM endocrinology final examination in 2020. I had the privilege of working at the same institution as his junior. He already has 6 publications in various indexed national and international journals to his credit. He presented various papers in different national and international conferences. He is a life member of Endocrine Society of India and ISBMR and a course coordinator at ESI Fundamental Research Workshop. It is wonderful to have you back, Dr. Rahul, and thank you so much for joining us today. I would now request Professor Jacob sir to please take over the session.
Thank you, Nilanjan, and thank you, Monam, for the invitation to preside over this and chair this session. I think I think it may be about 12 years back, or 12 or 15 years back, we were first surprised with post-bariatric surgery remission that we saw with diabetes. I think that was a very surprising thing. Prior to that, we always thought of diabetes as a progressive, lifelong disease which you cannot get rid of. And I think after that, we had Dr. Roy Taylor's work on very low-calorie diet. And then we went on to intermittent fasting. And to make it more and more easily palatable to people, we have looked at various ways in which we can try and reduce calories. So I think what Dr. Rahul is going to talk about today is time-restricted eating, which is very different from calorie restriction or intermittent fasting or very low-calorie diet. I think it is important here for me to highlight that all of us are very much aware that we go based on a circadian clock, and our master clock is within the hypothalamus. I think what many of us don't realize is it's not just the big master clock that is running the whole system or the hormonal systems. It is also that every cell in our body is also running on a circadian clock. That means the genes that are there, the DNA that is present inside the cells are not going to replicate the whole 24 hours. They are going to replicate at a certain time through the day. And one of the triggers, like for hormonal replication and hormonal circadian rhythms, it's the light and things like that manage it. But the cellular clock, I think, is managed by cues that the cell gets from feeding and nutrients. And I think this is very important to understand that all at different points of time when we eat, we deal with the nutrients differently. And that is because the genes that are involved in protein, in lipid, and in carbohydrate synthesis, they are replicating only for a certain period of time, and they do not handle nutrients as well during the rest of the time. So I think that is the concept behind time-restricted eating, and I'm sure Dr. Rahul will tell us how that is going to lead to better outcomes in terms of weight, in terms of diabetes remission, if possible, or even in terms of other better outcomes in terms of cardiovascular disease and other things. So Rahul, I'll be very interested to hear what you have to say and put this in a scientific ways so that when patients come to us, patients come to us with different fads. It could be anything. So I think, and there is so much of misinformation about diabetes remission now in the web and on internet and WhatsApp. So I think to put it all in context, we will listen to Dr. Rahul talk about the scientific basis behind time restricted eating. So Rahul.
Thank you, sir. Jubin sir has nicely summarized my whole talk before even starting. So, first of all, I'd like to thank the Endocrine Society of Bengal and Nilanjan sir for inviting me for this interesting topic, which I also have tried. I will be getting to that soon. And so I will just start sharing my slides. One second. I hope you can see my slide.
Not yet.
Not yet.
One second. Share screen. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, you can see now. So yeah, there has been decades and decades of research regarding what we eat. That is the macronutrient component of the food that we eat. And more recently, there has been importance being given to when we eat. So time restricted eating, also sometimes it's called time restricted feeding. So it is sometimes used interchangeably, but time restricted feeding is more for the experimental part of it. For your animal studies, they use the term time restricted feeding. And for humans, we use time restricted eating. So this is coming more and more research is coming on this perspective. And recently, I think one famous cricketer has also died. That is the late Shane Warne. So there are a lot of extreme diets also being. He was on a 14-day liquid diet, if I'm not mistaken. So we don't know if that is what led to his death. But anyway, so there are a lot of things which are available online. So nobody knows exactly so what to do. And many people who go on these diets or these intermittent fasting or time restricted eating, they find it difficult to from your daily routine. You will have to change your whole routine. So in that time restricted eating, it's somewhat easier compared to the other two. That is the calorie restricted or your intermittent fasting. So have we always eaten breakfast, lunch, and dinner? So these three meals that we eat on a regular basis, has it always been like that? So regarding breakfast was not known. It was unknown in the early days. So in the Roman era, they never used to have breakfast. They used to have only one meal a day in the afternoon, and eating immediately after waking up or breaking the fast, it was considered to be a sin, or it was considered to be gluttony to have a meal immediately after getting up. And even the meal, the church has said that they used to frown upon people having a meal before morning mass. So that also was frowned upon by the church. And lunch was never known earlier. Lunch is a term which came up only recently after the 19th century. So lunch, once after the 19th century, the word lunch came from the word nuncheon. So that is, it meant a quick snack in between the meals. And dinner was the major meal what people had in the early days. So dinner was had usually in the afternoon before dark, because people couldn't afford, because candles and firewood was expensive. People couldn't afford to cook during the in the dark time. So people used to have the major meal before the dark. And there also used to be a meal called the supper. Supper was a very light meal. Supper derived from the word to sup. So that is, people used to have just before going to bed a light meal like a soup. So the industrial revolution has totally changed the way that we eat. So it holds good today also. So the industrial revolution has changed because now people are in a hurry to get to work. So people have a quick breakfast. People want to have breakfast fast before leaving. And after they get back so late at night that they want to have a meal in the middle also. So that's how lunch became more and more in the forefront. So that is the next meal that we eat. And usually the lunch is usually a light meal that we either carry from our homes or it is brought to the office through these dabbawalas, as you can see in Mumbai. And and now people are staying up later and later. We have social obligations like such as the CME event. So we are attending this at night, and people are staying up later watching late night movies. So people are staying up later eating food later. So as sir had already mentioned, the circadian rhythm or the biological clock is closely, it is not only with the lighting, the dark and the light, the nighttime and the daytime, which affects the circadian rhythm. There are many other cues which affects the circadian rhythm, which includes sleep, activity, and more importantly, the nutrition. The nutrition has a close role to play in the circadian rhythm. So circadian rhythm is important for your behavioral rhythm, that is your activity, the rest, your feeding and fasting. It also is important for coordinated responses of all the different organ systems in our body, be the liver, the adipose tissue, the digestive system, insulin secretion, your brain, everything is coordinated by the circadian system. Uh, and apart from that, your energy utilization and your energy storage, and finally your oscillation, your circadian rhythms of your hormones, your enzymes, and your proteins. So all this is connected with your circadian rhythm. So there is this new term because of this more and more research which is happening with when we eat. So this new term, that is chrononutrition. So you are matching your nutrition, that is when we eat, with your circadian rhythm. So that is called chrononutrition. And if there is a desynchronization of this, if your meal timings and your circadian rhythm don't match, is when you can develop metabolic complications and so on and so forth. So chrononutrition, that is when we eat, is determined by many factors. It can depend on your age, it can depend on your ethnicity, your genetics, even the light and dark cycle, the sunlight and the nighttime duration. So all this can affect the chrononutrition. And there are circadian rhythm disruptors, which causes desynchronization of this chrononutrition. So that is circadian rhythm desynchronization. So this is what leads to all these complications. So as sir mentioned, Jubin sir has already spoken about the genetic basis. So each and every cell has a circadian clockwork. So there is a molecular mechanism behind this. So there are many amount of proteins and feedback loops which are involved in switching on and switching off the various metabolic pathways with regard to the circadian rhythm in each cell. And that in turn also controls the central circadian clock and also your peripheral circadian clock. So most important of which is the clock and BMAL proteins. Those are the main regulators of your molecular circadian clock in the cellular framework. And those activate and repress the other proteins which are involved, and each of these proteins have a role in your circadian rhythms of your liver, that is the metabolic pathways of your liver, your gluconeogenesis pathway, the lipid pathways, and also the hormonal circadian rhythms. So all these proteins have an important role to play in that. And finally, the clock control genes uh, is what controls your central and your peripheral circadian clocks. And these clocks are further influenced by your environment, the food that you eat, the activity that you do, and the sleep that you get. So everything is involved in this circadian rhythm. So if you look at the circadian rhythm with respect to the hormones, So if you see in this resting phase, you can see melatonin is the predominant hormone that we see when we go to sleep. Melatonin typically rises at least 2 to 3 hours before we go to sleep, and it peaks during the middle part of your early morning. And when we wake up, when we are exposed to sunlight, within 1 hour, usually the melatonin levels start falling down. FGF23 again is an important hormone which is secreted mainly by the liver. It is a hepatokine, and it's a predominant hormone during the fasting state. So it regulates your lipolysis, your gluconeogenesis, and your ketogenesis. Cortisol, as you know, it peaks in the morning, and it actually prepares you for the activities of the day. And in the day, you have slowly your ghrelin. Ghrelin is the one which peaks in the morning, and it also comes in between your meals to make you hungry so that you eat a meal. And apart from that, you have your adiponectin, which is the insulin sensitizer, which increases around in the afternoon time. And insulin is peak time is seen during around 5 p.m. So as you know, melatonin, all these hormones have different peaks and trough levels. So the important concept I want to bring out here is the importance of melatonin in the regulation of your glucose responsive insulin release. So melatonin, as you know, it begins to rise 2 to 3 hours before sleep, and it acts on the receptors on the beta cells. So what it does is it decreases the glucose responsive insulin release. So what happens is if you take a meal close to bedtime, the glucose responsive insulin releases decrease, so you have a higher chance of having postprandial hyperglycemia. So that is an important concept. So all this, as I summarize, it is a crosstalk between the circadian pathway and your nutrient sensing pathway. So anything which disrupts this the central and peripheral circadian rhythms, it leads to a desynchrony. So these disruptors are abnormal food timing, your social jet lag, if you're flying from one part of the world to the other, shift workers, night shift workers, all these can lead to central peripheral desynchrony, which in turn can lead to your metabolic syndrome, diabetes, dyslipidemia, digestive issues, you have a fatty liver, all these things can lead to these conditions. So what about Indian data? So this is a study from a zoology department in Delhi. So they did a camera phone based study to look at the eating patterns of around 90 individuals. So they found that, as you can see from this graph in black, most of our major meals is most of our calories comes towards the evening part, that is after 6 p.m. So that is when most of us come back from work. The only thing which you see in the early morning is tea. So tea, you can then ice creams and sweets, all these things we have during the later part of the day. And if you look at the timing of breakfast and dinner throughout the week, more or less the timings of our breakfast is around 7 to 8 a.m. and timing of our dinner is from around maybe 9:30 to 11 p.m. So we tend to eat late, and we also eat breakfast early before we go to work, and it doesn't differ between weekdays and weekends. So what is time restricted eating? So the main thing that we are trying to do is we are trying to align our timing of the meal with the circadian rhythm. So the important thing how it differs from other that is calorie restriction and intermittent fasting is you are permitting ad libitum energy intake. So you are not restricting on the calories, and you are restricting only the period of the eating window. So that is, it ranges from 8 to 10 hours. You have different regimens, okay, which I will be coming to. So the thing is, it is very simple to tell the patient. You don't need, the patient also does not need extensive knowledge of what is the nutrition, calories, all those things, amount of protein, fat, all these things. They don't need to know all that. You just have to say, you just have to tell them that, okay, you just eat during this time and that's it. So that is this very simple approach. So by restricting the amount of the feeding window, you are, the studies have shown that you are decreasing the metabolic complications and you're increasing the quality of life. So as I mentioned earlier, so if you're looking at chronic energy restrictions or calorie restrictions, that is typical, you have your different types of diet. So the thing is, it is there throughout the day. You're eating meals at the same time that you always eat. The amount of calories is decreased. And if you're comparing that with intermittent fasting, you have intermittent fasting is again different. That is, you have alternate day fasting, you have 2 days in a week fasting. So the main thing is, on the days that you eat, you're having normal calories. On the days that you fast, you're having very less amount of calories. And time restricted eating is where you are not limiting on the calories, but you are restricting the time window. In theory, okay, I'll come to that. So if you are comparing time restricted eating and calorie restriction, so time restricted eating, your diet is a usual diet, and in calorie restriction, you are changing your usual diet. So the adherence, if you're comparing time restricted eating and calorie restrictions, it is time restricted eating is better because you feel a lesser feeling of deprivation, and it is more easy for the patient to do. And you just have to track the eating window, that the time that you're eating. So that is the only thing which you need to track. However, in calorie restriction, you have to find out the amount of calorie that you're eating, so it is more difficult for the patient. So it is less complex compared to calorie restriction. So the thing is, you are changing the usual timing of your meal in time restricted eating. So people who go to work, you might find it difficult. So suppose you have a 9 to 5 job. If you're doing the time restricted eating in the morning, you might have to take your last meal when you're at work, just before you're leaving back home. So it is difficult sometimes to do that. And in calorie restriction, you're maintaining the usual timing, but you're decreasing the amount that you're eating. So in the other thing is, it is easier for the patient because you're alternating between ad libitum eating and fasting. The other one is you're continuously causing the calorie deficit. So it might be more difficult for the patient compared to the other one. So in theory, what they say is you're allowing ad libitum eating. But the thing is, in practicality, because you're decreasing the time window, you are actually decreasing the amount of calorie intake. So in theory, although you say the calorie is not restricted, but in practice, although you have a less time to eat, so finally what happens is you decrease the amount of calories. So then, are you a morning person or are you a night person? So different people have different ways that they do things. Some people are owls, some people are larks. So some people like to get up early and study and revise in the morning. Some people burn the midnight oil and they sit late at night. So are the circadian rhythm of all people the same? So is it that, okay, every person has the same type of circadian rhythm? There are still research going on that. So there is still, it is debatable that different people, if you're a morning person, maybe your whole clockwork is set to another way, and if you're a night person, the whole clock is set to another way. So it is a debatable. So depending on that, there are different types of time restricted eating. So you have an early TRE, that is from 8 to 4 p.m. is the eating window. You have a mid TRE, which is 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. A late TRE, which is from 12 noon to 8 p.m. And then there is a participant choice TRE. So they can decide what time they want to eat. So there are different types of TRE. So what does the data show? The data has shown there are more animal data than human data. So animal data has shown that animals like mice, they eat mainly during the evening time, and they don't eat mainly in the morning. So if you restrict their eating time only in the evening, it is found that they have lesser adiposity, they have better glucose tolerance, they have lesser hepatic steatosis, lesser inflammation, and better motor coordination, and they don't gain weight. And if you continuously feed them in the morning and evening time, they have all these metabolic complications and they gain weight. And in human trials, what they've seen that there is a metabolic switching, and because you're fasting for maybe 14 to 16 hours a day, you have again a mild ketonemia, which is also seen in other keto diet, but it is not as severe as that. So you have a mild ketonemia, and this in turn improves your beta cell function and insulin signaling, and it can prevent diabetes. So most animal studies have shown that you have lot of benefits in every organ. You have in the liver, it decreases the amount of hepatic steatosis, it maintains your gut integrity, it increases the browning of your adipose tissue. It also has benefit in the heart, improves your blood pressure and your contractility, and it also improves your endurance and muscle fitness. If you're looking at human trials with regard to body weight, at about 8 weeks, you're expecting around 6 to 8 kg reduction in body weight. And in terms of percentage, you're expecting about 6 to 8% again in reduction of body weight at around 8 weeks. If you're comparing intermittent fasting with time restricted eating, what they have found that the amount of body weight reduction is more in the alternate day fasting or intermittent fasting, that which you can see in the orange, and in the gray, that is the one which is the time restricted eating. So if you're looking at that in alternate day fasting, you are getting around 4.5 to 5 kg reduction at around 12 weeks, and at around 4 weeks, and for time restricted feeding, you're getting almost less than 4 kg reduction. And with respect to fat mass also, you're getting a better reduction with alternate day fasting compared to time restricted eating. Again, with respect to cholesterol, alternate day fasting has shown to reduce cholesterol more compared to time restricted feeding. But again, there is much more reduction than compared to the controls. With regard to triglycerides, initially the triglycerides are lowered more in time restricted feeding. However, the later stage, alternate day fasting seems to be better. With regard to blood glucose, it is found that fasting blood glucose is modestly lowered in all participants who have done time restricted eating. At about 8 weeks, you can see about 5 to 10 milligram per deciliter reduction in fasting blood glucose. With respect to postprandial blood glucose also, there is a reduction which is more seen in your early TRE people compared to the late TRE. So why is it that? Because as I already explained to you earlier, melatonin. So melatonin has a role to play. So people who do the late TRE, that is from around 12 to 8 p.m., who eats dinner later compared to your early TRE, have a higher risk of having postprandial hyperglycemia. With regard to NAFLD, so there are studies in animal studies which have been done. So animal studies have shown that there's only a modest reduction in liver inflammation without much hepatic lipid accumulation or other characteristics of NAFLD changes. So main thing is only liver inflammation is reduced. So again, the data regarding the benefits of TRE with NAFLD is you need more data. So the data regarding the severe reduction in severity and regression in fibrosis is lacking. So there are many caveats with these trials. So most of these trials have failed to report energy intake. There is also manipulating size of the meals of the day, and also we don't know too much about their macronutrient content or distribution. So all the benefits that we see, is it specifically due to time restricted eating itself, or is there differences in macronutrient the constituents of the meal? So we need to know what is causing these benefits. So now a patient comes and asks you, so what should I do? Should I do an early TRE or should I do a late TRE? Is it skipping breakfast better or skipping dinner better? So what they say is, many trials have shown that early TRE is better because, as I told you regarding the melatonin and the glucose responsiveness of insulin. So the early TRE has shown to be better because it has better insulin sensitivity, your beta cell responsiveness is better, your the amount of inflammation and oxidative stress is less, and your blood pressure is better improved. And in late TRE, your sugar blood glucose can worsen and the responsiveness is decreased. And if you're comparing early and mid TRE, again, the early one is found to be slightly better compared to the mid TRE, that is from 10 to 4 p.m. The early one is from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. and the other one is 10 to 6 p.m. So the early one is found to be better compared to your mid TRE. With respect to your insulin sensitivity, your fasting glucose, body weight, and the percentage fat reduction. So another debatable thing is Ramzan. So during Ramzan, again, this is a form of time restricted eating. But the thing is, the Ramzan, which is observed in different parts of the world, again, the nutrient intake and the composition, it varies with your location and the culture. So what the studies have found is that the weight reduction, some people have a weight reduction of around 1 to 3 kgs. Some people eat from a clinical perspective, you have people who gain weight during Ramzan because they eat a lot during the your iftar and suhoor that time. And some studies have shown that there is also a fat mass reduction of 0.5 to 3%. And with regards to fasting plasma glucose, it is a lot of conflicting results are there. Some say fasting glucose increases, some say it's normal, some say it's decreased. Because the practically when you see is that if you're checking your fasting plasma glucose in the morning, you're eating a meal at around 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning during Ramzan. So is it actually fasting plasma glucose? It is not. And with regard to lipid profile also, there is an improvement. So there is a study which has again recently been published 2 years back, which has shown that dawn to dusk fasting, that is eating, it is mimicking the Ramzan time. So you are eating dinner at sunset and having a pre-dawn breakfast. That has also shown some benefits with regard to your DNA repair, insulin signaling, and your immune system and glucose lipid metabolism. So this is debatable. So most studies have shown that the early time restricted eating is better than the late, but this study has shown that okay, maybe even the night feeding is also, it is not that bad. So again, it will be a personal preference regarding what needs to be given to the patient or what the patient wants to choose. And how many people adhere to this diet? The acceptability is better because you're not overtly changing the quality or the quantity of food. You're just limiting the eating window. So if you're looking at an 8-hour window, if you're doing that 5 to 6 days per week, the adherence rate is around 55% for over 12 weeks. Over 10 weeks, it's around 62%, and over 6 weeks, it's around 84%. So that is pretty good compared to your other calorie restriction and your time restricted, intermittent fasting. So there are still many gaps in the research. There are many inconsistencies, as I mentioned earlier. Your study designs are different. And there are also wide variety of regimens which have been chosen. Your feeding window range, it ranges from 4 hours to 11 hours. And again, many studies have tried out early TRE and also late TRE. So, and apart from that, you don't know whether the benefit is due to TRE itself or is it because of the minimal calorie restrictions which you see when you are limiting the window period. And it is ideally not appropriate to advise TRE in certain group of people such as children or teenagers who are actively growing, in diabetic patients who are on mainly sulfonylureas, SGLT2 inhibitors, and insulin, especially the ones with type 1 diabetes. However, patients who are pre-diabetic and patients who are obese, who are only on metformin or a DPP4 inhibitors, these patients can definitely be tried, can be advised regarding TRE. It's better to avoid TRE in people with acute illness, eating disorders, pregnancy, lactation, and chronic illnesses. So a personal experience. So I have also, as I mentioned earlier, I have also tried time restricted eating. So I began my journey in December 2019. So when I was 90 kg at that time. So what I did was I started having dinner at around 7 p.m. And after that, I had breakfast the next day only, usually by 8 or 9. And I didn't, except for cutting down on sugar, I used to add at least 3-4 teaspoons of sugar into my coffee. I used to have at least 2 to 3 cups of coffee per day. Apart from that, and because COVID also helped because we stopped ordering from outside. Apart from that, I didn't restrict on any calories, and I didn't also exercise during this time. And I had good results. Initially, it was difficult for me, at least for the first 2-3 weeks. And after that, then I used to monitor my weight daily, and I had around almost 15 kilos of weight reduction by October 2020. But however, I have come back home and now I have again gained 3-4 kg. So that is because of my mom's cooking, probably. Yeah. So if you are advising people to go on a time restricted eating, or if you want to tell, are we advising only obese people or overweight people? Is it only for weight loss, or do we practice it on a daily basis? Can everybody do it? People who are lean also, are benefits seen with those people also? Again, there are not enough studies for that. There are some animal studies which have shown that it is beneficial, but again, in human trials we don't have enough data regarding whether lean people also benefit from doing this. So if you are advising people to go on a ideal circadian day diet, the first thing that you tell them is immediately after waking up, avoid eating for at least 1 hour, because you need to get exposed to sunlight. So once you're exposed to light is only when your melatonin levels go down. And following that, the ideal period is, it's an early TRE is better than a mid or a late TRE, which what most trials show. But again, that is debatable. So an early intervention of TRE is better. Tell people to do a light or moderate outdoor exercise and avoid eating a meal 2 to 3 hours before you go to bed, and get adequate sleep of at least 8 hours per night. However, this is only ideal, but it is not practical. How many people can do this on a regular basis? Because most of us are busy, most of us have social obligations. So all these things are very difficult to do practically, but this is what ideally needs to be done. So summarizing, time restricted eating is a simple approach because you don't need that much of extensive nutritional knowledge. And the important thing is, practically the calorie restriction is invariably present. And early, mid, or late TRE, which one will you tell to the patient? That is again depends on the first patient's lifestyle and patient preference. You will tell them to do that. And so for the best results, it might be better to combine both what you eat and when you eat. So you need to have minimal calorie restriction, and you need to control when you eat also. So I think that will give you the best results compared to doing either one alone. So I thank you. And this last slide, I would like to thank Vivek sir for that actually. So he was the one who told me regarding. So this is some saying which he told me about. So if you eat once a day, you're a yogi, like Sadhguru. If you eat twice a day, you're a bhogi, a food fanatic, and if you eat thrice a day, you become a rogi. So I thank you all for the patient listening.
Thank you, Rahul. So I think that was very interesting, and you made it. I mean, I listened to it completely. You put your personal experience that made it even more interesting. But before I open it to questions, I have one question. You know, when I first thought about time restricted eating, it sounded like I am putting my nutrient intake at the same time that my genes are adequately primed to deal with the nutrients. That seemed to be the, but then in between your study, you said that dawn to dusk fasting and Ramzan fasting, which seems to be completely opposite to what we are trying to do.
Exactly.
Because they are eating at the time when all their metabolic pathways are shut down.
Exactly.
And they also seem to benefit. Then now I'm wondering whether all the benefit of time restricted eating is just from the calories that are declined, nothing to do with timing your meal with the metabolic, diurnal activity.
Yes, sir.
So how
again,
do you confront this question?
Yes. So that's what I said. So some people, so they say the chronology, there is something called early chronology and late chronology. So some people are early morning people, their whole circadian rhythm is different from the people who are late night people. So maybe because of that, the late night people are benefiting still from doing the late night fasting, the late night feeding compared to the early morning feeding. And some people will not benefit from the other one. So maybe that is that. But again, it is debatable because most of the studies, if you look at the circadian rhythm of the hormones, the morning time is when if you eat in the morning is when that it synchronizes with your circadian rhythm. So most animal trials are showing the benefit with the early TRE, but it is debatable. The evening time also people are getting benefits. So maybe it is because of the calorie restrictions that we are getting. So I cannot say it is because only of the time restricted eating.
I'm going to ask you one last question. So are you a lark or an owl? Because you seem to have lost 14 kgs on day.
I'm a lark. I'm a lark. So I cannot stay up late night.
So I think we have a few questions
Yeah.
on the chat box. One is from Vishal Sharma. He says, sir, normally gym people say that when you come for exercise, you should have something like a fruit or caffeine. So it won't be 1 hour interval before breakfast. What do you respond to that?
Yes. So yeah, I forgot to mention regarding exercise and doing, if you're going on this time restricted eating and exercise. So as I said, the ideal thing would be not to eat for 1 hour. But again, so now if you're doing exercise in the morning, some people get up really early at 5 a.m. and go to the gym. So you will need to take some calorie supplement at that time, a calorie replacement, you can say. And some people exercise late at night. So if you're doing the time restricted eating in the morning and you do exercise at 8 or 9 p.m., you will definitely get hungry and you will need to take a calorie replacement at that time. So it is, again, it is, you need to individualize. You cannot say that okay, you shouldn't do that. So that is again something interesting. That is, so in my hospital, this is what we do. We do the 8 to 4 is what is usually advised by our nutritionist. So they take a major meal at 8 o'clock and at 4 o'clock. So before they go back home, they take their last meal. And in the middle, if you're hungry, you eat salad or soup or you take egg whites. So this is what they do. So they do calorie restriction also, and they do the time restriction also. So that is something.
I think we have a few more. There are a few appreciations for your talk from Dr. Anand and someone else who is not, I can't see his name. The next question is from Dr. Surinder Gupta. Dr. Surinder, I think, is from Ludhiana. So Dr. Surinder is asking, for obese people, meal skipping is a dream. But doing a bit more mean, taking a bit more time while eating a meal can also help. So it's just a comment that,
I guess so.
Mindful eating where you chew and you spend time chewing might help. Next question is from Dr. Pankaj Patwari. Again, it's a comment, but during Ramadan fast, people take more calories at iftar.
Yeah,
I think
it varies. It varies.
It varies because this is something we had done a study in Vellore during Ramadan, and what we found was there was at least 300 calories more. But we used a food frequency questionnaire and dietary recall, and we found that they were eating at least 300 calories more during Ramadan than before Ramadan. The other question is insulin resistance changing during the day. Anything to do with that? So whether
So again, when we looked at the circadian rhythm of the adiponectin is the one which comes during the early morning. It peaks at around 12 to 2 p.m. So that increases your insulin sensitivity. So probably it has to do with that. And again, your melatonin has the other effect at night. So I guess that is why the morning time is preferable, I guess. So probably it's that.
Okay, Dr. Surinder has another question. I think he's still sitting in his clinic. He wanted to know whether we can divide the dinner, because dinner by 8 p.m. is too difficult in most. I think at least people who are practicing till 8, 9, they still have clinics to run. Can we divide the dinner, taking a bit at work and a bit at home? But my guess is that will not serve the purpose. So any comments on that?
Again, so you cannot, it's difficult to tell people what is right and what is wrong. So ideally, if you're doing it, you do it during the window and don't take a meal after that to get the best results. So, but if that works for you and you're getting benefits, then go ahead, you can do that. So finally, it's the results that we want. So I didn't do the ones which are said over here. I did my own thing. I did from 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. was the latest I had the dinner. And I used to have at 8 a.m. So for me, I did that and I got results. So it depends. You cannot say one person works one way only.
I think we have no more questions in the chat box. I think I'll open it up if anybody wants to ask a question directly by opening their cameras and their microphones. They can do that. Otherwise, I'll hand it back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Ashish has something to say. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Rahul, for excellent talk, for your excellent talk. For the last few years, the chronobiology of diabetes is being touted very much. So that relates to the circadian rhythm of different hormones. As
Yes.
you alluded, the melatonin, the dopamine is also very important.
Yes.
In that perspective, it was recommended that your breakfast should be more or less good quantum, and
Yes.
lunch mid quantum, and afternoon snack something, and take dinner, light sort of dinner by
Yes.
7 p.m. or 8 p.m. like that, and bedtime snacks.
Yes.
So these things are being very much popularized. And as I heard from you, that early TRE in some series has some good result. But here, if you uh, follow the chronobiology of different hormone, including the dopamine, etc., so early TRE and the chronobiology has some sort of some
Yes, sir.
contradiction like that.
Yes, sir.
And that once the bromo 15 was very much uh, popularized, but that popularity is waning nowadays. So what is your take regarding the chronobiology, the circadian rhythm, and TRE? So your nice talk has eliminated some unclear areas so far.
So,
I
yes, sir.
think the
So
breakfast,
personally,
like
yes, sir.
the Western style, the breakfast should be very sort of rich calorie dense, and the dinner not that, because you rightly pointed out the melatonin,
Yes,
and
sir.
it's a very difficult in the Indian setting, and particularly in the IT workers who come here or attached to some, the US, and they're taking call in the late night, and they're all this food habit, and every one of them in my clinical practice, uh, I experience that they are getting obese,
Yes,
and
sir.
sometimes they are getting diabetes, dyslipidemic. So I invite your opinion, and what's your take?
Sir, thank you, sir, for your comments. Sir, regarding doing this for diabetic patients, I don't I've not done it in too many patients, so I'd like to get the comments from Jubin sir and Nilanjan sir also regarding this. So for me, only usually pre-diabetic and people who are just obese with a fatty liver, these are the patients who we usually recommend doing this. But diabetic people who again who are on certain OADs such as sulfonylureas and SGLT2, I usually don't recommend them going on a TRE. So yeah, that is important. And regarding for people who are obese and either people who have a fatty liver or doing an incidental scan, so they usually come say that they want to reduce weight. People with dyslipidemia. For these patients, the studies have again shown that the early TRE is the one which is better because you have more synchrony with all your circadian rhythms of most hormones, because at that time is when your mainly your insulin response is much better, your beta cell responsiveness is much better compared to the delayed TRE. So again, I would say it is better to eat your breakfast and then rather than skipping your breakfast. And if you're skipping your breakfast, what happens is you will have a very heavy dinner, maybe. So that can be, again, you ideally you're supposed to have a light dinner. You might have a heavy dinner, and people sometimes they do skip their breakfast and they might not have a heavy dinner. Those people might still get results. So they might have a meal only in the afternoon, maybe, which is heavy. But most of us, I think, we don't have a heavy meal in the afternoon because most of us are at work. So usually we have a light snack or a tiffin which we take from home. And once we get back home is when we put up our legs and we have the big meal at home. So that is what usually happens.
Rahul, I can see one more
Yeah.
question, but again, this is related to Ramzan from Dr. Fatma.
Yeah.
So she says, as Ramzan is going to start from Sunday,
Yes.
There's a whole change in eating pattern as well as sleeping pattern. My question is, usually we have dinner around 10 to 11 p.m. and then sehri at 3 to 4 a.m. So the gap is very less. So what can we do in this situation? Or you can guide us about the timing.
I don't think I can guide you about the timing because you are the ones who decide. I think the Quran is the one who decides the timing. I don't know regarding that. I'm sorry, but I think the meal Ramzan. Are you actually trying to do? What are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to lose weight? You're doing because of your faith, right? So I think it varies. For people who are not looking at losing weight, they will continue to eat what they want, and so that's why the trials have shown different results. Some people have gained weight, some people have not lost too much of weight. So what exactly I the question what you're trying to ask, what exactly are you trying to get out of doing the Ramzan fasting? So majority of the time you're not trying to lose weight, you're doing it because of your cultural belief. So the timings, it varies for different people. So usually iftar is at I think 6 p.m. Usually 6 is when you break your fast, and the last heavy meal that you take is early morning, that is at 3 or 4. So it again, you are the ones who have to decide what you want to eat, and if you are doing it to lose weight or not. So what are you trying to ask me in the question is what I want to know. As in, I didn't get your question completely. At Fatma, you can have food, but restricted.
Actually, may I comment on this,
Yeah.
Jubin? When we have such patients who are diabetic, what I tell them is to, if possible, you advance the dinner to something around 8:30 or 9-ish. If somebody is accustomed to taking dinner at 11, even if I say he or she will not shift it, advance it to 9, but that's what I suggest, so that there is some gap between the dinner and sherry. And the iftar should be a symbolic one, or maybe a small meal, not that much. So that's what I suggest to many patients who are on anti-diabetics, especially sulfonylureas or insulin, but I don't know whether they comply with it. And as you have said, for Ramadan fasting, the purpose of fasting is something different. That's the religious or faith. It's not for weight loss. And having said that, this is an excellent talk. It's well researched. You worked hard into it. Thank you for that. But may I comment that I think this time restricted eating is a new terminology, but as you have started your talk with, it was the default eating pattern in some way among the hunter-gatherers, or the even 2 generations back in the rural setting, where people, because of the paucity of electricity, what people used to do, they used to wrap up everything in the rural areas by 8:30 and go off to sleep.
Yes.
So that was a sort of a by default compulsive. So 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. fasting. So this is something not new. And what I feel, Jubin may have a comment. There are many benefits have been shown in animal studies. That is the bench, the prothrombotic factors, insulin resistance, so on and so forth. But 2 important tangible factors to an endocrinologist would be weight loss and glycemic control. For that, it is any form of caloric restriction, whether a chronic energy restriction or in some sort of post-caloric restriction through time-restricted eating, is the main mechanism that is brought into effect for the benefits if they are seen. What I mean to say, if the total calorie intake is more, will the effects of time-restricted feeding be that prominent? I have doubts on that. So it is ultimately the main, there may be other mechanisms, the hormones, the chronobiology, but the predominant mechanism where it has shown positive effects is probably through an overall calorie restriction.
Yes, yeah, that's what I was trying to say, sir. So finally, I think there is little bit of calorie restrictions which might be giving the benefits. So again, I think there needs to be more research on that, and more human trials will give us more information regarding that. Jubin sir, you have.
No, I think I agree. So regardless of what the timing is, I think calorie restriction is going to give you benefits. And the only macronutrient you can really avoid is carbohydrates. You cannot really cut down on proteins. You need a certain amount of fat because you need to run your functions as well. So the only macronutrient you can really cut down on is carbohydrate. So this is what I tell all my patients. Those they tell me all kinds of diets that they have heard in the net or they have met a nutritionist. I said, whatever you do in the end, it is if you cut down on carbohydrates, you're going to get the benefit.
Yes.
So I'll hand it now back to the
Dr.
organizers.
Jubin, I have some question. Can you respond? Yeah, I think the vegans have an age as per us concerned. And
Dr. Ashish, we can't hear you. It is breaking up.
Ashish, you are not audible. I think we have to end it here because you are not audible. If you can talk to Dr. Jubin, I think, or personally one-to-one to address your query, because there's maybe some problem of connectivity at your end. So I think Jubin can we complete the session today? Over to Mona.
Thank you, sir. Thanks to Dr. Rahul for the wonderful deliberation. Thanks to Professor Jacob sir for sharing his valuable inputs and insights in the topic. Thanks to Endocrine Society of Bengal for organizing this wonderful webinar. Thanks to the audience for their participation in their busy schedule. Now, since the dread of the COVID pandemic is on the wane and we are doing good for the time being, Endocrine Society of Bengal will be resuming the mock examination session in physical platform from May onwards. The first such session will be held at IPG MER and SSKM Hospital, Kolkata, about which you will be intimated in due course. That is all from our side. Good night. Stay safe.
Thank you, sir.
Good night,
Thank
everyone.
you. Good night. Good night, sir. Good night, Nilanjan, sir.